Finally, I'm back here today with some exciting news for you all. The Conscious Relationship, my program supporting singles and couples to create true love and thriving romantic partnership, is here. It's now available for your enrollment, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you about it and also share some clips from inside the program. Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Leticia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. So first things first, I want to let you all know why on earth I even created this program. And for that, I need to take you back a few years ago. So I was coming to the end of a 10-year romantic relationship. I was engaged. I had viewed my life with this person as if we would be together forever. And so when we got to a stage in our relationship where things just weren't working anymore, we really felt like we weren't on the same page. We had grown apart. Our vision for the future was different. We even wanted to live in different countries. And we just kept going round and round and round in circles, trying to figure out a compromise. In the end, we decided we just can't meet our needs and desires in this relationship together. So the best thing to do for both of us will be to go our separate ways. So then we moved through a conscious completion of our relationship, and then I was left reviewing what had happened and processing heartbreak and being consciously single and all of those beautiful things. It was through this period that I started to ask myself, how can I make sure I never find myself in this situation again? Because the truth was, over 10 years ago, before I got into that relationship, I had already, as a young woman in her early 20s, taken myself through an intentional process to make decisions and build my awareness as to what sort of romantic relationship I wanted to be in. Within a year, I met my partner, and then we created an amazing relationship, secure, aligned visions. It just felt easy. We were on the same page, which was so different to my experiences of long-term relationship before that, which were very roller coaster, definitely not secure, a lot of trust issues. So when I got into that relationship, I had really looked at myself and those patterns, and I had decided I would trust this person, and I knew what I needed to thrive in relationship together. But then 10 years later, here I am completing our relationship, not on the same page, and I'm asking myself, how can I make sure that I never ever go through this again? And how can I also support other people who are going through this? Because I know when it was coming to the end of our relationship and we were going round and round in circles, both of us felt completely lost, that we had no one to turn to. We didn't know how to get the support we needed. It was like pulling our hair out, trying to come up with a solution. And both of our inner voices, our intuition, were telling us this just isn't working anymore. And it's okay, you still love each other, but this isn't working in the way that it has in the past. So we really sat on that decision for a long time before we ultimately pulled the Band-Aid. And then we had to sit with the inevitable heartbreak, which no matter how amicable a separation is, no matter how much you love each other, no matter how conscious you are through that process, you are still going to experience a lot of pain. And it was because of that pain that I started to look at, hang on a minute, let's look at why we ended up in this situation. Maybe it's not just that we just weren't in the right relationship together, that we're not the right people for one another. What actually went wrong? And how can I make sure that in future relationships, I am able to set that relationship up really intentionally so that I'm not combating these issues that we were up against. This then led me to doing the really uncomfortable work of reviewing how I was responsible for creating the situation I was in and ultimately the ending of that relationship. Since I've been through that process, I have learned so much about romantic relationships. And as I've moved through that process of reviewing my own relationship and then learning even more about relationships and then applying them in my own relationships, I have come up with a process to support couples and people who are entering into relationship in the future so that you know exactly how to create a relationship that will truly allow you to thrive as a couple. Because the thing that I learned was this: true love is not found through the right person. Because even if a person was right at one stage, like my partner was and I was for him, at some point in your relationship journey, especially if what you desire is a long-term committed monogamous relationship, there will be a point where it's no longer feeling right or aligned and you might feel like you're growing apart. This is normal because you're both humans and so you're growing and evolving. And if you're like me, love personal development in the coaching world, you're going to be growing rapidly. And it's likely your partner is as well, but maybe if they're not as committed to personal growth and passionate about personal growth, etc., it's likely that their growth will be different, maybe even slower. And this is going to come at odds at some point along your journey together as a couple. So I learned that it's not about finding the right person, because the right person at one point won't be the right person at a later point, and you won't even be the right person for them at a later point. So how do we stay in long-term committed relationships, and how do we stay in a way where we're not settling, just accepting things as they are, that they're not great, which is what so many people actually do. I never wanted that for myself because that's something I witnessed so much when I worked as a family lawyer. When I was working as a family lawyer, I saw lots of examples of how relationships end up in really messy divorces. And what was consistent about these relationships was that they had stayed together and accepted things as they were. They were resentful, that resentment grew, they grew apart and then further apart. Disconnection created more disconnection, and they sat with it for as long as they could put up with it until usually children had left or shared assets didn't matter as much anymore, or retirement happened, or there was some external situation that meant that now I'm okay to not be in this relationship and to move out and be on my own. And at that point, there's so much anger towards each other that it becomes a really messy process because of that. So I really wanted to know, how do I never get to that point? And not only how do I never get to that point, but how can I have an amazing relationship, one that gets better over time, one where I continue to thrive, where we both continue to thrive. This is the way I love to look at the world. It's the way I look at work. It's the way I look at business. It's the way I look at my life. I'm always asking, how do I thrive over the long term? And it was that inquiry that led me to creating this process that I'm teaching in the conscious relationship. This process has been applied and created in real time. Over the years of working as a family lawyer, through being in my own long-term relationships with the plural, and through that self-inquiry I have done since being in my 10-year romantic relationship. It's also been tried and tested in a relationship I was in after my 10-year relationship ended, and it was so incredible because even though that was a relationship that only lasted around a year, we were able to use these tools to create a connection that I had never experienced to that depth in my 10-year relationship. Even though we, of course, would have been able to had we had the tools, I was able to experience that with someone in just under a year. It was incredible. It showed me the power of these tools and moving forward in an intentional way with a process to support you in creating a relationship that truly thrives. Now it's this process that I recommend every single person, whether you're in a relationship now or you want a relationship in the future. I recommend you familiarize yourself with the conscious relationship process that I teach in the conscious relationship program so that you're set up for success. The biggest issue in romantic relationships is that we're not showing up consciously throughout the relationship. And the longer we're together, the less conscious we are because we get into a habit with one another. This is where problems start to arise. And because we don't want to lose the relationship, we start to ignore those problems and then they get bigger and bigger over time. Instead, you need a process that's going to tap you back into consciousness. So I created a monthly process that you get to use every single month in your relationship so that the relationship evolves with you over time, so that you're being checked back into your consciousness as a couple, and so that you're also supporting the relationship with everything it truly needs to thrive. We're talking communication, conflict resolution, connection, sex and intimacy, commitment, collaboration, and really stepping into consciousness as a couple. When you've got tools and a process that you know and you learn and you automatically turn to each month, it helps you to give the relationship everything it needs to thrive. In addition to that, you learn an opening process that will set you up with everything you need to have a shared vision for your relationship with where you are right now. Now, this process is for you whether you're in a relationship right now or whether you're not. It's for you if you're single, because once you know how to support a relationship to thrive, you will feel more safe, open, and confident in welcoming a romantic partner into your life. If you're in a relationship right now and things are going great, this process will be implemented into your relationship as it is now and help your relationship to continue being great so that it doesn't end up like mine did, which was over time unconsciously starting to take a downturn that ultimately led in separation. If your relationship is not so great right now and you're even considering whether to leave it, or you're wondering, how can I just improve this, and it's a significant drain on your life, which I also completely understand, this process is what you need to do to help improve the relationship. Then you'll be in a position to know whether you truly want to leave the relationship instead of doing what I did, which was leave the relationship and then look at how we could have improved it. Instead, you want to work on the relationship now. You want to give it everything it needs to thrive now, and that then sets you up to be in a position to experience a great relationship with your partner, or make the decision to leave the relationship knowing that you both have truly done everything you can to try and make it work. And if you're not in a relationship right now, you get to apply the process to yourself first so that you get to understand what you really need and want in a relationship and how to actually set a relationship up for success. And then when you're in a relationship with your partner, you'll be able to guide them through this process. This will enable you to feel safe, ready, and open to welcoming a special someone into your life, because so many of you are closed off from a romantic relationship, even though your heart and soul deeply desires to share your life with a partner. And it's truly because you don't know and can't see how you can have a relationship where both of you are able to thrive. This is the exact process that I will be using in my next long-term romantic relationship, and it's a process I've already taken myself through personally. This comes from behind the scenes in my life, and it's truly everything you need to create a strong foundation for your relationship now or in the future, and then at every step along your relationship journey. Now I'm going to share some clips from the very first module in the program, and then at the end of this episode, I'll give you some more details about how you can enroll and what to expect. Okay, so the first clip I'm sharing today is from the first week, the first module in the Conscious Relationship program. And this clip is all about the 3 stages for falling out of love, which is really helpful to know and be able to see how that process works so that you can, 1, identify whether you've found yourself in any of these stages and you can locate where you are now. And if you're not in a relationship right now, you can reflect on relationships you've had in the past or even relationships you see around you, and you can pinpoint whether that process has been true for you. So there are 3 stages to the process, and all of them are very, very relatable. And I would say that that's not a great thing, everyone, because what we want to learn how to do is to create true love rather than fall out of love. But there are some things we do in the beginning stages of a relationship, which then progress us to the 2nd and 3rd stage, which ultimately lead to this position that I found myself in, and so many couples find themselves in the future, which is where you feel like you've just grown apart, and your 2 options are either to settle with how things are and to accept that relationships aren't very great, Or you separate and then you start again looking for that person. But what you don't do in that process is you don't actually learn the skills that stop this process of falling out of love from happening in the first place. So listen to this clip and find out about the 3 stages for falling out of love, and then we'll talk about how we turn that around. Now, to understand how these 4 challenges happen in most relationships, it's really important to understand what the process for falling out of love looks like. I'm going to explain this to you across 3 stages. We set ourselves up to fail in romantic relationship because of the very first stage, which I like to call we're in love. In this stage, it's usually at the beginning of our relationship. We're on an oxytocin high and we're simply going with the flow in our relationship. We ignore our needs and desires because we might not actually even be aware of them because of this oxytocin high that we're on. So we feel less connected to ourselves, less grounded, less connected to our body cues. This sets us up to ignore body cues that are telling us that something isn't working for us. Alternatively, you might actually be aware that you're ignoring your body cues. So you might actually be tapped in and still noticing that your body is uncomfortable with something going on or something is not sitting right, but you consciously choose to ignore that because you're afraid of missing out on this wonderful new romantic partnership. We all do this in some ways, which is why we just need to be more aware that this is what is happening at the beginning, especially of a relationship. So we're in love, we're more likely to be ignoring our body cues because of this oxytocin high. We're also less likely to approach our partner and have conversations. We're less likely to slow down, to ask questions of them and to ask questions of ourselves. And even if we have that information, like I mentioned before, we're still unlikely to bring that information to our partner because we're afraid of rocking the boat or just of things being uncomfortable. So we don't slow down, we get carried away and swept up, and then inevitably we end up progressing to stage 2. Stage 2 is what I call the reality check. This is where we start to realize something just isn't working or it's not working anymore. And there's this growing resentment happening. But at this stage, there's a difficulty because these needs and desires that we've ignored, we haven't mentioned them even to ourselves, but especially to our partner. And so there's this habit going on with the way we relate to our partner. And now we need to break that habit, but it feels more uncomfortable now because we've effectively been saying through our agreement to the way things were that this is okay. This relationship meets our needs and desires. So because we haven't slowed down in that first stage to actually communicate, ask questions of ourselves and our partner and share where our needs and desires are not being met, it now actually becomes more uncomfortable to have this conversation because we do have to rock the boat. We have to change things up. And potentially by this stage, there's actually more to lose because now we're in a place of habit, a place of comfort, a place of familiarity, and we don't want to lose this relationship. So we might actually end up ignoring our needs even more than what we were doing before in stage 1. And with that ignoring of our own needs, we get more and more frustrated and resentful. And as you progress through this stage, more and more and more, you begin to focus on how your needs and desires are not being met and less of a focus on where they are being met, which is how we then progress to stage 3. Now, stage 3 is what I very much tongue-in-cheek call the end. This is where we start to question whether this is even the right relationship for us. We start to believe that perhaps the answer, the solution to my predicament of not having our needs and desires being met is that we're just not with the right partner. And so we start to look outside of our relationship for answers. Maybe this isn't the right person, maybe this isn't the right relationship, and so we start to open up to the fact that this isn't the right person for us, or we decide this is just how relationships are and we settle. So I call this the and because ultimately we decide either to separate or to settle. We don't realize that there is another way. We can actually shift things, slow down, have conversations, get to know what our needs and desires are, and make some shifts so that they're actually being met. Instead, conflict is growing, disconnection is growing, and then we ultimately believe that the answer is in another person, another relationship. So we're more focused on that than looking at where our relationship is great, what actually needs to change, and having those now even more uncomfortable conversations with our partner. It's likely that if you do bring these issues up with your partner now, there's so much resentment behind them and so many stories added on top that they don't care about me, they don't love me, etc., etc., that when you do have the conversation, or if something triggers the conversation and it's an explosion and it's the heat of the moment, it doesn't go very well because there's been this growing disconnection between you. There's been this lack of trust within yourself because you're not advocating for yourself, you're abandoning yourself, and there's a lack of trust in your partner and the relationship because you don't feel like you're on the same page. So ultimately, this is the end because it's not a thriving partnership, but there is another way. In the next clip, I talk about the symptoms of not thriving in a romantic relationship. It's very useful for you to listen to this list of symptoms and to recognize whether these are symptoms you and your partner are experiencing right now, or whether in a previous relationship, these are symptoms you've experienced. When you have that awareness and you can pinpoint, hey, this is where I'm at right now, you also know that you're in that process of falling out of love. And that's great because you can turn things around. And the result is this. Ultimately, the relationship doesn't thrive because our needs and desires are not being met by the relationship. Now, even if we ignore it initially, at some point, the truth will be revealed and you will not be able to maintain the status quo. This is why so many relationships start out great, but then they end because we don't slow down to get the information we need in the beginning. So over time, throughout that 3-stage process, eventually you're experiencing symptoms of that process, such as not feeling seen, heard, and respected, not feeling connected as a couple, not feeling like you're on the same page, feeling like you're growing apart, you're just different people now. The relationship is now actually draining you, whereas in the beginning it was energizing you. You find yourself compromising on issues that are important to you. You haven't learned to manage conflict as a couple. You don't feel secure in the relationship, and you certainly can't commit to the relationship. Even though you might be in a committed relationship, you might even be married, you might be living together, you still aren't fully committed to the relationship. There's one foot out, even if it's on a completely unconscious level. Because how could you commit truly to being in a romantic relationship that is not supporting you to thrive, that is not meeting your needs and desires? So you check out of the relationship in subtle or not so subtle ways. And ultimately, if you do decide to stay together, you decide to stay together because it feels uncomfortable to leave one another, or because you have children, shared assets, you rely on the income together, financially it makes sense, or there might be some other reason that's tying you together, but what isn't tying you together is your relationship itself and your desire to be in this relationship because you are thriving as a couple together. Now, in this third clip from week 1, module 1 of the conscious relationship process, you're now going to learn what a relationship can look like, what the symptoms are of a thriving romantic relationship. And this is all as a result of what you learn in the very first module in this process. You'll be learning how to create true love, a 4-step process, and you'll be learning a very special set of practices, conscious relationship practices that I have personally created from myself and my own experience and journey to support you with everything you need to start your romantic relationship off consciously and to give yourself a really solid shared vision and set of agreements and guidelines for your relationship that enable you and your partner to have your core romantic relationship needs and desires met. Without further ado, listen to how a relationship truly can be. Now, I believe that every person who gets married, or when you start your relationship and you decide to commit to each other, or when you have children or shared assets or any significant moments or milestones in your relationship that changes the nature, I truly believe that you should be going through this process we're doing this week to make sure you're set up for success, to make sure that the relationship meets the current season of your romantic partnership together. This is what enables you to thrive together as a couple, and it's also what allows you to actually be committed to each other. Imagine going through this process when you commit to each other in a wedding context. Most people just do the wedding, but they don't know how to actually set up their marriage together as a couple for success. And when your relationship thrives because your core relational needs and desires are met throughout the relationship, it enables both you and your partner to feel seen, heard, and understood by one another. It enables you and your partner to trust each other and yourselves. It allows you and your partner to feel cherished, respected, and valued by each other. It enables you to understand how to resolve conflict between you in a healthy and productive way, which is completely normal as a couple. There will be conflict, and so you need to know how to face it in a way that feels safe and peaceful and is also giving you guys a result where you're more connected and understanding of each other. It sets you up so that the relationship energizes you for all the other areas of your life, so that you feel supported by your relationship and the issues that matter most for you are actually dealt with and in alignment. It means that what's keeping you together as a couple is your relationship rather than some other external thing to the relationship, which is so much better for everything else that is external to you, because that's a lot of pressure to put on your relationship, that the fact you're in a relationship is because of your kids or your shared assets or something else outside of the relationship. It's also a big burden on that particular thing to give you the satisfaction you're looking for outside of your relationship. It sets you up to feel secure with one another and to be fully committed, actually on a conscious and an unconscious level. And it means that you don't need to be afraid of growing apart, because you and your partner know how to grow together as a couple and to meet each different season of your relationship. This is what thriving in a romantic relationship is all about, and it's totally available for you. You just needed the right process, and that's what you have here, and it all begins with this first week in the conscious relationship. I hope you enjoyed those little sneak peeks from the Conscious Relationship program. As I mentioned, the Conscious Relationship is my new program for couples and singles, teaching you how to create true love and a thriving romantic partnership. You will learn a practical process for starting the conscious chapter of your romantic relationship, and you'll be learning a process that you will utilize month on month for the rest of your relationship to support your romantic partnership to thrive. The practices that you learn and implement will set you up to embody the conscious relationship skills needed for a thriving romantic relationship that gets better and better over time, that nurtures your romantic connection and attraction to each other, and also supports both you and your partner's individual purpose and potential. Enrollment is now open for a limited time. It's open until September 6th, and we start on September 9th. It's a 6-week program. Each week you have a training as well as a set of practices that you'll be implementing, and you'll have a plan to follow so that you know on this day I do this and on this day I do that. Whether you're single or in a relationship, or whether you're in a relationship and your partner wants to do it with you or they don't want to do it with you, you'll be able to walk yourself through the program. And as a result of walking yourself through the program, implementing the practices, you will do your part to be prepared and to learn everything you need to truly thrive in romantic partnership together. This program is not about passively consuming the trainings. It is about doing the practices, because through the practices, you will embody the conscious relationship skills needed for a thriving romantic relationship. things like conflict resolution, communication, commitment, collaboration, consciousness, connection, sex, and intimacy, you will learn how to create and use the skills needed for a thriving romantic partnership in real time. And then every single month, you will have the process to go deeper and deeper into embodiment of those skills. And because this is the very first time I'm offering this program, you will also have email support from me throughout the entire 6-week program. This means if you've got questions about any aspect of implementing the program, you'll be able to get my personal support to assist you. The Conscious Relationship is only open for a limited time until September 6th. We start on September 9th. And if you're on the waitlist for the Conscious Relationship program or you're signed up to receive my newsletters, you will receive a very special discount available for a limited time. So make sure you check your emails, and if you're not on my email list, make sure you sign up over on my website. If you can't figure out how to do that, simply send me an email and I'll help you to do that. You can find me at leticia@leticiaringe.com. You can find the full details for the Conscious Relationship program at leticiaringe.com/the Conscious Relationship. I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to Relate Higher, your go-to resource for learning how to consciously approach all of your relationships. To deepen your learning and practice, make sure you're subscribed to receive the Relate Higher community newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter sent to you every Monday, providing further coaching and education to support your relationships. Subscribe at relatehigher.com/community. And if you haven't yet left a 5-star review for the podcast, we ask that you please do that now so that this podcast can reach other listeners who also want to learn and practice conscious higher relating. Because remember, the more people who learn, the better relationships we all enjoy.